record it, Mike, if that's okay, but I see you got your,
Oh,
your set is already there, so that's great. So I just wanted to say a couple of things getting started. So I'm Alan Campbell. Those of you who don't know me, I'm the president of CISCA right now. And it's my pleasure to be introducing you tonight to Mike Gilbert, who is a guy I heard about way back when I started paddling, because Mike's been very active in kayaking and in organizing paddling across the country, actually, for a long time. So I sent out a note, but I just wanted to, because it's so ridiculously long, I wanted to repeat it and tell you that Mike is the owner operator of BC Kayak Center, which is in Vancouver. So that kind of makes sense, right? But he's also a kayaking guide, a consultant, a product tester, an ambassador, a dealer, a lobbyist. These are all true, by the way, a sponsor, a director, an examiner, and certifier. I mean, where does this guy find time to talk to us? I want to know. He's quite a busy dude, obviously very organized man. And happily, we were able to get Mike interested in coming over and doing some courses for us as part of our spring training program. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the ones that he's involved with, you will get a chance within spring training to do that. Edmund's just reminding me that I record what my screen shows, so I won't be watching the gallery. Once we get going with Mike and he does a presentation, I'll just leave my screen that way, but I'll be able to hear everything anyway. So thanks, Edmund. Anyway, back to Mike. Basically, I'm signed up for one of Mike's courses, maybe you are too. And everybody has a different style. Everybody has a different way of learning. My view is we can all learn from everybody. And I don't get a chance to take a course with Mike very often, so I'm looking forward to that. And we wanted to give him a chance to talk a bit about his company, because one of the things CISCA is trying to do with this, as we've said before, we want all these folks who are doing this good work in our region to continue to be able to do it. It's pretty tough right now, you know, for a lot of people, and kayak businesses, coaching businesses are no exception. And so we definitely want to patronize them. We want to promote them, and we'd like to support them. And I hope you agree with that. And so with that, I'm just going to ask Mike, if you could say some things, Mike, about your company and the kinds of things you do. And then I understand you brought some pictures along to share too, and that'd be great. And if people have any questions, can they ask them right out, or would you prefer to have it organized through a chat? What would you like?
no, they can ask them right out, as long as they, I think the best thing to do is to realize that when they want to ask a question, to unmute. And then once the question's asked, just to mute themselves back up again, so we don't have that rebound effect with the noise in the vocal.
That sounds good.
So,
and knowing that Edmund's on the call here someplace, Edmund, since I know you're kind of a wizard at this stuff, if you wouldn't mind watching the chat so I don't have to change my screen, which is recording. And if we miss something, maybe you could bring it up for us. Appreciate it. Okay, Mike.
I have to leave at 7:30, so.
Okay, good enough
maybe,
then, as long as you can.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Mike, over to you.
perfect. Thanks so much, Alan. So hello, everybody. It's actually a real honor. When Alan got hold of me, I was really taken aback at the kind of support many of the clubs are giving to all of the different providers, instructors, guides, this kind of thing that have gone on over the last year. So my heartfelt thanks to you and CISCA for inviting me on this and inviting me over there to help do some instructing a bit later on in the spring, in April and May. What I'm going to do, but before I do that, I'm just going to say hello to a lot of the people here, because I've either seen you on other courses that I've done, or I've seen you at PPS, which I know we're all probably missing terribly right now. And I'm not sure, I haven't heard whether or not it's going to be a go for this spring. I kind of doubt it. Yeah, Debbie, you're sort of saying an emphatic no with the head shake. Okay, yeah. If I do have to get up, which I'm going to do in about 30 seconds, it's because I've got a very cute little dog that's growling to get back into the house from outside. So what I'm going to do is in order to tell you a little bit more about myself, is I'm just going to go right into the presentation because I've included those slides in the presentation. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, Missy, here, on your towel and lie down. On your towel, lie down. No, that doesn't go for you guys, just the dog. Okay, so I'm going to share screen here. Let's see if I can do this properly. Well, this is what we want, I think. So we're going to go here. There, is that working for everybody? Yeah.
Looks good.
All righty. So here we are, Siska presentation for the spring. Topics that we're going to cover tonight. Who is me? What is my company, BC Kayak Center? Some of the tours that I'm offering in 2021. I'm going to give you a little bit of a slide presentation of New Zealand, where I was invited to go down there to do some coaching and some instructing in February 2020. So we actually came home February 29th, and we hit February 29th twice, once in New Zealand and once on the flight back, apparently. And then it was like 5 days later that the world shut down. So amazing. Then we'll talk about the Siska workshops in April and May. I've got a question and answer thing at the end of it, but please, if you've got anything to say or any questions that you want to ask, don't hesitate to pipe up or use the texting, the chat that we can have a look at. So that's me. That's my boat, one of my boats. And that's the Fraser River, the south arm of the Fraser River. That was taken about, I don't know, about 2 weeks ago. It's a nice day. So I'm retired now, as Alan was alluding to. So he was asking the question, where do I find the time? Well, apparently in retirement, you get busier than you ever have been in your whole stinking life. So I've got a couple of businesses. It's pronounced Pasantic, not Pacantic, Pasantic, risk management, and BC Kayak Center. With Paddle Canada, I'm an instructor. I've got my level 4 skills, level 3 instructor, and my level 2 instructor trainer. I'm also a guide with Sea Kayak Guides Alliance. I'm a radio examiner with VHF Radio with the Canadian Power and Sail Squadron. I'm on 2 board of directors now, both Paddle Canada as well as Sea Kayak Guides Alliance. One of my favorite things to do is to lobby for different projects that are important to not only sea kayakers, but also paddlers nationally. And by nationally, we were on one of the committees that did the river review for the Canadian Parliament that happened about 3 years ago. We've also done some lobbying for the English Bay and Fraser River areas. And our current pet project is the Broken Island Group. I'm sure all of you are aware that there's a large question about to open or not to open. So we're trying to lobby along with about 20 other people, 25 other people, the federal parks, Parks Canada, into ensuring that the area, the BGI, is opened up to not only commercial users, but also private users. I like to sponsor different things, and my 2 favorite ones are local clubs, but also BC Marine Trails. I think that's such an important and great project. In my Pasantic business, I'm a consultant on risk management, and I do not only with other companies, but also with paddling companies, and Mustang Survival is probably my largest client out here right now. We do product testing for Gear Lab paddles, Gear Lab Outdoors, Mustang Survival, and Sterling kayaks. I know there's a few Sterling kayaks in your club, as well as on the island. become very, very popular, which is great. I'm ambassador for Mustang Survival. I've become a little bit of an inventor in my spare time, and I've developed a little thing called the Quirk, and what that stands for is quick release close contact tow system. So it's a small tow line, and I'll show you a picture of it a bit later. With everything else, I'm a rescue diver with Patty, and I'm really missing traveling, as I'm sure a lot of people are. As I say, Pasantic is the consulting and umbrella corporation for all of my companies. BC Kayak is the sea kayak instructional company, and it offers skill and instruction courses. It provides skill clinics, such as with clubs like Siska. And I'm a really big believer in getting together with the clubs. I've done it for years now with the ones over here on the Lower Mainland. And obviously it's just because it's easier for me. But I'm also a big believer in that you've got different pricing as a business as to how you're approaching different things. And there's such things as private clinics. There's such things as putting on your own clinics or courses. But then there's also times when clubs come to you. And in a lot of cases, clubs may or may not have a lot of money. But more importantly, they're bringing the clients to you. So there's very little to do. So for me, with a lot of this, we try to offer a much reduced price over our regular pricing for clubs when they come to us. And I think that's the way it always should be. I'm also a huge proponent in clubs getting training for members of their clubs who are interested in becoming instructors so that they can instruct within the club and keep the expenses down even further for club members and the executive. It's a great way to do it, and it's a great way for the people within the clubs to meet and greet everybody and have a great time together while still learning, and maybe even getting some certifications, Paddle Canada certifications. So we also do a lot of dry land and knowledge classes, dry land with topics that have to do strictly with paddling, but also with safety products like Paddle Smart, which is part of the Adventure Smart program. And we do a lot of that, and all of those courses are free of charge. And there are a number of instructors over on the island that are Paddle Smart certified as well, and they can do the same thing. And I also do VHF courses. One of the things that helps us get by, aside from teach, is selling different gear, different paddle products. Our biggest company that we deal with is Gear Lab Outdoors. And it's through them that we provide the two-piece carbon fiber Greenland paddles called Kayak and the Malik. They also have a number of other products, deck pods, paddle bags, paddle floats, paddle ports, and the little Picadie. This is the Quirk. You can see it. That's a photo of my kayak from above, the front of the cockpit. And the Quirk is the red line there. And it's a very simple, easy to deploy system. It's based on knots and one stainless steel carabiner that keeps it attached to anything in the event that everything else lets go. But I'm proud to say that one of the nice Christmas presents I got last December was a call and a patent confirmation from Industrial Design Patents, which was kind of cool. So that's my first patent. So we'll see how everything goes from there. We're on to the next project in about 4 or 5 months. And our next radio course, if anybody's interested, is on Sunday, March 7th. That'll probably be my last one that I'm doing before I get totally involved in on-water activities. So if you need your VHF, give me a shout. It's really nice. I'm one of the few examiners that's being provided the opportunity to do the course by video conferencing. I use Google Meet. I don't use Zoom. Same kind of thing though. and it works really well. You don't have to go anywhere. It's from the comfort of your home, and it's all taken care of in the comfort of your favorite seat. The tours that we're offering this year, I'm not a huge company. I am me. That's the company. So with everything else that I do in terms of clinics and courses, I like to get away and do some nice tours every once in a while. I've been doing some work up in the Yukon over the last little while in terms of coaching and instructing up there. And I made the decision since Sweden had to be canceled during COVID last summer, I decided to stay within Canada this year. And this time we're going to have a look at the Yukon River, and it's about a 12-day trip, 10 to 12 days, where you're going from Whitehorse all the way up to Dawson City. And we're just traveling along the Yukon River and seeing some of the sights along that entire route. So it should be a lot of fun. The other areas that we're going to be doing in BC are South Broughtons, which is always very, very famous and very, very interesting, primarily with the whale population that's up through that area. Then we're going to go for a little bit of more remote area in the Broughtons. So we're going to go do probably a circumnavigation around the North and South Broughton Islands. And then our last thing that we're going to do is in September, which is going to be head over to the Deer Group and paddle out there and paddle back. So all of those areas are incredibly fun. They're incredibly beautiful, and they're just great to go and visit. So that's the Yukon River. We're going to be doing about 740 kilometers from Whitehorse up to Dawson City. In the South Broughtons, we're going to paddle out for about 5 days and then head up to Echo Bay on the 6th day and grab a water taxi back. For the North Broughton area, we're going to water taxi in and back. And then in the Deer Group, we get to paddle out, paddle back, and enjoy that entire little chain, which is just to the east of the Broken Islands. So, New Zealand. When we were at PPS, I think it was about 3 years ago, one of the coaches from New Zealand came up to me and he said, would I be interested in coming over to New Zealand for their Kayak Fest in 2020? And New Zealand being so far away, I'd never even heard of this. So I said, yeah, of course I'd be interested. It'd be a nice trip, and it'd be great to meet some new people over there and see how all of our skills were interchangeable or what the differences were. So over the next couple of years, while they were getting the Kayak Fest all organized, we kept in contact, and finally they invited me over there to do some coaching and some instructing. So I was over there from February 1st right through until the end of February 29th, but I was only actually doing the kayaking for 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks. And then my wife came over to New Zealand. She flew into Auckland and she joined me for the last 2 weeks where we did some nice traveling around and came back home on the 29th, as I mentioned. This was not our first visit to New Zealand. I've got family who live over in Auckland and just north of Auckland. So we were familiar with the country, and for my wife and I, we knew where we wanted to visit, which was kind of cool. Spend a little bit more time in, and that was the wine country up in and around the central of the North Island. And for the instruction end of things, that was basically all taken care of for me by CASK, which is the organization that works over there, the Kayak Association for Sea Kayaking. Or it's actually called Kiwi, Association of Sea Kayakers. So this is where we were. New Zealand is just to the southeast of Australia. So not quite as close to the equator as a lot of people think. As you get onto the South Island, it's made up of two primary islands, the North Island and South Island. As you go down to the further south of the South Island, it's very Canada-like in what it offers, both climate-wise as well as topography. But for me on this trip, we were on the North Island, and you can see Auckland just below the little Kiwi represented on this one. And then just going over to the next slide. This is a slide of the North Island, and you can see some of the highlights that are marked there with Auckland on the upper left there. The actual kayaking that we were doing was taking place up in the Bay of Islands, which is north of Auckland, as pointed out by that little sign. And in the Bay of Islands, we stayed primarily on the main island, which is called Ura Puka Puka, or as they say, Ura Puka Puka. And it's all part of the Bay of Islands. There's a number of different campsites that are on this island. For the time that we were there kayaking, CASC, the Kiwi Association of Sea Kayakers, they had actually booked and taken over all of the different campsites for the island for the 2 weeks basically that we were there. So this is the first bay, Utea Bay, and we were here for 5 days doing the 2020 Kayaking Symposium. There were about 75 students that were there. There was about 12 instructors. I was joined by one of our other Canadian instructors that actually lives on the island and works with one of my competitors over there, Blue Dog Kayaking. So Amber Champion, who also used to go over there prior to COVID to do work as a sea kayak guide and as a instructor and as one of the staff members for one of the large companies down on the north tip of the South Island. She joined me at this kayak festival, which was really cool, and it was great to see her there. So the first 5 days was called Kayak Fest 2020, and it was a symposium based very similarly to what PPS is all about. And that is, you've got a number of instructors, a number of coaches, and what they do is they set up different little segment clinics for each of the days, segments in the morning, segments in the afternoon, and there are also some day-long tours that go on. And they do their teaching in the bay. The water there, I think, if I remember correctly, it was about 83 degrees, 26 centigrade, I guess that is, 27 centigrade. And for the most part, we were dealing with temperatures between 25 and 32 centigrade. So the skies that you see in these pictures, with the exception of half a day, that's what we got for 2 weeks. It was simply amazing. I was told continuously that that's not how it normally is, but I was going to take it. So it didn't really matter. So we were doing lots of rescues and re-entries, wet exits. We were doing some touring of the area. On the left-hand side, we've got some of the students practicing some of their re-entries. At that point in time, of course, COVID wasn't a part of it. And so, as you can see, we were still fairly social distancing there until such time as we get right beside one another. And you're just supporting the boat from there. In the upper right, that's a pendant that was given to me as a gift for coming over there to help them out. And in the bottom right, that shows you the campground where we stayed for the first 4 or 5 nights. So there were about 60 tents thrown up there, and there's about 85, 90 sea kayaks of all sorts of various kinds and colors and models. Down there I'm going to guess that at this symposium, you would be lucky to find 10 to 15% of the kayaks being fiberglass. Everything else was plastic. What I discovered was a lot of these paddlers and a lot of the coaches and instructors down there, they really love their coastlines and they really love to rock garden. And there's a reason for the plastic, believe me, you'll see it shortly. So this is some of the rock gardening that we would do and some of the places that we would go to. So for the next 4 minutes, I hope this is going to work. Just have a look and enjoy at what's going on. That's Amber in the distance there.
Tons of barnacles, I see, hey?
Yes, yeah. So keep your eyes also not only in the close distance, but also in the far distance. It's a beautiful area, the Bay of Islands. It's got so many different places to go and visit, to go and see, and to paddle to. We just had a wonderful time there for the entire 2 weeks. And I'm planning on heading back there, and I'm planning, hopefully, once all of this COVID mess is over, to be able to take a group of Canadians back there and enjoy this area as well. So a little plug for Gear Lab. They do take a beating. The fun, of course, is always trying to miss the rocks, right? So that little area, it was basically just 300 meters away from our campsite. So everything is so close in terms of finding different things out. This is an overview of the area. The bay where we were camping in initially, you see where that boat is coming into a long channel that fades off to your right-hand side. At the far end, the right-hand side of that bay, that's where our campsite was. And we just went all the way around all of these islands, and you can go in any direction basically and just explore new and different places. But it's all so beautiful. The water's gorgeous and the landscape is beautiful. And one of the best things about it is the rock gardening, going from just shoreline to caves. And there's a lot of caves to go and explore.
Mike, somebody asked, can you camp anywhere in that region, or are there
Nope.
certain places?
There are designated campsites on the larger islands. On some of the smaller islands, you can basically make up your own campsite. On some islands, so you do have to be careful. It's just like up here. There are indigenous lands down there, so you just have to be aware of that and know where they are before you start unloading your kayak. So we did a lot of navigation courses. One of the fun things that we did on one of our first stays down there was take different groups of people on basically a hunt, and the hunt meant having to navigate to different locations within certain periods of time, making sure you got to those locations and then moving on to the next one. And it was basically a circular route all the way around the island. So it was a lot of fun. These are just some different views. On the upper right, that's where a lot of the kayaks were just put. You just drag them up onto the grass and that's where they stayed. Once again, on the left-hand side, a lot of shoreline. And then that in the bottom right is the bay where we were camping. We would have been camping behind the camera's angle there. And these are just people practicing different things within the bay under the eyes of one of the coaches or instructors. This is one of the beaches that we went back to and did some camping at a bit later on. The beaches are just stupendous. Lots of sailors are out there and power boaters because this is all very close to some fairly large communities. I'm not going to say towns or cities. They're maybe not quite that large, but there's a lot of people with boats down there, and they use them. They get out a lot. So with the kayaks, we can basically go anywhere, as you know, and these beaches are all just stupendous. And this is all from the same island. It's Otahe Bay. There's my kayak that I was using all by itself one day or one morning on one of the beaches. And one of the signs for Rupukapuka, it has a number of different trails and walks that you can go on down there. On the top of that sign are a pair of socks, and they've got a little bit of a story to them. At PPS, the last PPS event, which was going to be 2 years ago now, I guess, Jeanette Gallen and Gary Dorn were the ones that always put on that event. And Gary passed away a couple of weeks before that event took place. And one of the things that Jeanette did in his memory was she gave all of the coaches at PPS that year a pair of socks, the kind that Gary liked very much. So what I've done in honor of Gary, because he was a great friend and he was one of my mentors, one of my first mentors for sea kayaking, is everywhere I go, I'll take the socks with me as part of the travel plan, and I'll take a photo of the socks just in his memory, and I'll send it off to Jeanette. So those are Gary's socks on top of the sign down in New Zealand. So we had a little bit of placid rock gardening earlier on. Now we get out into some of the larger areas on the west side of the island. It's just like in the Broken Group. It's always, you get out to the west side of the Broken Group and all of a sudden you hit the Pacific swell and everything else. It seems to be the same way down in New Zealand. You hit the big swell once you get out to the west side of the island. when going through these little channels, it all comes down to the timing. You have to be careful of the currents that are created, and you have to be careful of the downdraft of the waves coming over the rock wall, just like that, so that you don't get caught into that well and get flipped over. You'll see I almost get caught in it one time before getting through. And everything comes down to wave sets. So when you time it right, everything just looks really easy. It's when you don't time it right that everything goes wrong. Okay, so one of the reasons why they asked me down there was to do some rolling instruction. This young fellow's name is Sam. He did have some rolling experience before, so it was pretty easy getting him going. But he ended up getting 3 different rolls: the butterfly, the standard Greenland. The butterfly is up here, the standard Greenland down here, and then just standard paddle rolls. And he was trying some Gear Lab products at the same time. So let's just have a quick look and see how it goes. So they had tour boats that actually come into this island with tourists all the time. It's a very, Urapuka is a very popular island up in the Bay of Islands. They've got some tourist areas, a restaurant, a very nice restaurant, and lots of trails, as I said before. So that's why it's a very popular destination with many of the boat tours. These are just some shots showing some more of the typical coastline that we've got here. And then after 5 days, this turned into what's called International Kayak Week. And that's where a larger group of people end up coming in. And what we're doing basically is we're not teaching so much as we're going out on excursions to all sorts of different places, including Hole in the Rock. Hole in the Rock is a location about 12 kilometers offshore. So you sort of have to navigate it pretty precisely. And that's exactly what it is. It's a huge hole in a rock. And one of the key things to do there is to do a roll in the middle of the hole and then come on back out. But this is some of the just beautiful scenery on the shorelines in and around the area. We take opportunities to try some different things. In this case, it's cliff jumping. You just get out of your kayak onto the rock walls, climb up the rock walls as far as you can, and you're jumping back in. Upper right, we're doing some line tossing for some rescue work and bringing people up. And you can see how large some of the caves are in the bottom right, where you've got the kayaks in the foreground, but also the one kayaker just going into the cave at the back end there. So this is that same little section that I paddled through going in this direction. You see one of the other kayakers now taking the waves through there. And here's another kayaker going through there, coming back towards us with surf. Now you can see the reason for the plastic boats in a lot of cases. There's a lot of shavings of boats. Just going out through to some of the outer islands, the huge number of cays out in the outer islands, as well as some really good shoreline surf conditions. As I said, the weather that we had there was just absolutely amazing. It was marvelous. Couldn't have asked for better times. We had a number of meetings and we had a number of clinics that went on with people. We did some night paddles down in the bottom right. And I think this is Glenda, one of the organizers, just doing her first roll. And that is a picture of our last campground that we stayed at for 7 days. Beautiful beach. Where the kayaks are in the foreground was a small group camping there. They didn't have anything to do with us. You can see in the far distance past the 2 white tents, a ton of kayaks at the far end and a bunch of tents back there. That's where we were. So this is what we had for 5 days. It was absolutely beautiful. So let's move on. If anybody has any questions about that in terms of New Zealand and the trip down there, you're just hang on to the question. We'll have a quick Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So what Alan has asked me to do for Siska is going to take place in April and May, and we're going to do, I think, a total of, at this point in time, 5 different clinics. So let's just have a look at what we're going to be offering. We're going to be doing some paddle strokes on Friday morning, April 9th. And the strokes that we're going to be looking at, and I'm completely open if someone that's coming on this clinic has a particular stroke that they would like to play with or learn or review or get better at, please don't hesitate to bring that forward to me. I'm really flexible, really easygoing with regards to any of that. But for the most part, forward stroke, it never gets old. There's always more than one way to do a forward stroke, depending on your kayak and your paddle and you yourself and the conditions around you, right? So far, I think I've counted 42 different ways of doing a forward stroke. So one is always not enough. Learning how to stop, reverse strokes. I find reverse strokes, people don't practice them very much. So it's a matter of, we'll be working on straight line and we'll be working on some power as well. Blade play, how to use your paddle and your blade most effectively and learn how to use it while the blade stays and remains in the water. And we'll do a little bit of work with draw strokes just to see how those go. And it'll be both some drop strokes and, if people like, some pry strokes, doing the same kind of thing. On that same day in the afternoon, we're going to be working on turning strokes. So the ones that I've got down on my list are forward sweep and reverse sweep, some 360 pivots, bow rudders and cross bow rudders, and then low brace and high brace turns. High brace turns, always good thing. Anybody know where that picture is in the, well, the only picture there? Surge narrows, yeah. Well, a little bit of a brace turn coming up. So that was out at Surge Narrows last October. I held a current clinic course out there. And the fellow that just did that turn is the president of SISCA. Not SISCA, he's the president of SCA BC. Everything's so close. Sea Kayak Association of BC out here on the Lower Mainland. So the next day on April 10th on Saturday morning, we'll do some wet exits and re-entries. And this is how this goes is really going to be dependent on those that are coming to the clinic, depending on whether they're just wanting to do the re-entries or they're wanting to do wet exits or they're just learning in some cases. So I'm completely open to how this goes. For wet exits, I normally do a progression series. So it's a great way to learn how to do a wet exit without getting worried about what's going to happen, especially if you haven't done them before. We'll be doing some assisted re-entries, some different ones, including some of the COVID varieties that have come out over the last year or so. We'll do some solo re-entries. That's always important, whether it's with or without paddle float. And then we'll be doing some bow, stern, and side rescues for those that are interested in doing that. And that's basically being able to come back up without doing your actual wet exit. So you're staying inside the cockpit, right? And you're just reaching over and grabbing the bow or the stern nose of the other person's kayak, or you're doing a side rescue using your paddle as a cross bridge. So all sorts of things that we can do. And if there's anybody coming to the clinic that has some other ideas or some other expectations, please don't hesitate. Once again, give me a call and let me know. In the afternoon that day, we're going to do some work on balance skills. I'm showing a picture of launching and landing here. The main reason for that is because probably 90% of all balance incidents take place at launching and landing, without a doubt. So we'll do some stuff with regards to that. We'll do some edging, low braces and high braces, and we'll do some on kayak play as well. You don't have to go quite as far as this, but if you want to, you can always try. When I come back in May, I'll be coming back on Sunday, May 16th, and for the morning, we'll be doing some blending skills. So what that means is putting 2 or 3 or 4 different strokes together and seeing what they can do for us. Trying to get a little bit more intuitive as to when we are going to use a specific group of strokes in order to get around different things. We're going to be talking again about blade control and blade play. And blade play and control, for me, is use of your paddle while the blade remains in the water. So you're blending and transitioning from one stroke to another stroke, from one skill to another skill, and your blade doesn't come out of the water. And it's being able to control that properly so that it doesn't slow you down, doesn't put you off balance. And we'll be doing some different combinations and coming up with some practical applications of what these blending skills can do. In the afternoon on Sunday, May 16th, what we're going to be doing is looking at towing skills. So towing skills, we'll have a theory discussion to begin with. We'll talk about tow systems. So for those coming to the clinic, I'm going to be asking that they bring their tow systems that they use. I'm a firm believer in using your own equipment so that you get to know how it works and you're able to use it without thinking when you do have to use it, whenever a situation presents itself. Talking about when to use the tow systems, the differences between long tows, medium tows, and short tows, and I'll bring over some some of my quirks so that people can have a chance to play with those and see how they work. One of the main reasons why I invented those was because I was absolutely useless and so uncomfortable doing short toes, leaning over somebody else's kayak and trying to paddle at the same time while maintaining contact with them. So that's where that whole development came from. And then we'll also talk about and maybe practice some different toe formations just to see how that works for everybody. In the morning on May 17th, Monday, we'll be doing some correction strokes. I don't know if you folks know him. That's John Jones up in God's Pocket when we were doing a course up there. Stroke corrections are pretty necessary. These two are some students of mine that didn't quite get the stroke corrections proper, and they ended up smacking into one another and having some great time doing it. But we'll talk about Mike's 50% rule in terms of stroke correction and directional control. We'll talk about how to correct for forward stroke if you happen to be going off center or off the straight line, and the same thing with the reverse stroke, which is probably even more so. We'll talk about how these three elements, the body, the boat, and the blade, all affect both keeping your boat in the line or in the direction that you want it to go in, but also when you apply different corrections to it. And then skill efficiency, how to make those corrections and how to make all of those other applications as efficient as possible. In the afternoon on Monday, we're going to be having a Greenland clinic, and we're going to be talking about Greenland versus Euroblade. What's the difference between the two? Positives and negatives, and don't get me wrong, there's positives and negatives for both. We'll be doing some more paddle play with the Greenland. I'll be bringing some Greenland paddles over for people to try should they wish, if they don't have their own. Although I know out on the island, it's probably one of the fastest growing paddle that people are including in as part of their inventory, getting a Greenland paddle, whether it's a full single blade or whether it's a two-piece blade. We're going to talk about rotation versus hinge when it comes to core and use of core. We'll be talking about blade efficiency once again, and then we'll just be doing some practice. That's basically it. That's me out on the Alouette River here on the lower mainland, and that was taken last January. And as I say, enjoy your next paddle anywhere that you go. This is a photo up in God's Pocket, just south of God's Pocket, actually. And we'll just stop sharing somewhere. There's a stop sharing button. Yes. Hang on. Let me see where that is. Stop sharing. Here we are. There we go. All right. Let's have a look at some of the questions. Mike, do you always use a Greenland paddle? I'd say that I use the Greenland paddle now probably 90 to 90% of my time when I'm out on the water. And the reason for that is I enjoy the Greenland paddle for its symmetry and its ease on my joints. I found that as I'm getting a little older, the narrower blade of the Greenland paddle relative to the fatter, shorter blade of the Euro, it tends to slice into the water a little bit nicer. It doesn't quite catch the water the same way as the Euroblade does. And as a result, it's softer on my fingers, my knuckles, my wrist, my elbows, and my shoulders. Excuse me. The other reason why I don't use the Greenland paddle all the time is when I'm teaching specifically, or more importantly, basic level 1 and level 2 courses, I always use my Euro paddle for 2 reasons. One, it's because it's the paddle that most of my students would be using. And number 2, it's just a lot easier to pull out of the water and show blade angle for your students when you're teaching certain skills. It's just visually a lot easier to see how the paddle is being held relative to the boat, relative to the paddler, relative to the water. So those would be the times that I use the Euro blade. But for the rest of the time, the other 95%, yeah, it's a Greenland paddle primarily. Okay, level 3 course in May. The level 3 course in God's Pocket, I normally always have them, I believe it's 6 days. And we spend at least 5 days up in God's Pocket. We arrive the night before day 1 up in Port Hardy. And we gather up there for a couple of presentations on the first night. We hit the water the next morning, cross over to God's Pocket, and basically I leave that up to the students as to what course they want to go on. They're the ones that are responsible for a lot of the navigation features. I keep my fingers crossed, and God's Pocket hasn't really ever disappointed me with regards to fog or low visibility situations, because that's a really important part of the level 3 course as far as I'm concerned. Being able to trust your compass, being able to trust your instincts and your paddle to take you where you want to go, even though you can't see it. It's always an interesting exercise. But we spend 5 days doing different skills, exploring God's Pocket, which is just wonderful. It's a beautiful little area. We cover a lot of God's Pocket throughout the entire course, going from the east end right to the west end and north to south. We work on both the south as well as north coasts. North coast is normally a little bit bigger in terms of waves and surf and sea action. So it's a little bit more fun, especially for the level 3 students. And then what we often do is we come back down and we spend some time at Quadra. If we don't have enough in the way of currents, we'll go into Quadra and we'll spend a day at Surge Narrows playing in the surf there. And maybe sometimes on the way down, once we get past Quadra and we're coming back down into the Campbell River area, we'll stop in at Roberts Lake and do a rolling lesson or some rolling skills and some other skills, as well as a major rinse off in some fresh water after 5 days up in the salt chuck up in God's Pocket. So level 3, probably the biggest thing skill-wise and practically that people have to bring to the course is the ability to roll. Doesn't have to be on both sides, but it does have to be consistent, so that if you try a roll 4 times, you're going to get that roll at least 3 out of the 4 times, hopefully. And then the other 2 major parts to it have also to do with rolling, and that is doing a wet exit and then getting back into your kayak and rolling your kayak back up. So it's a re-entry and roll. And then the last part to do with the rolling is your lead on a toe, and you roll over, you release the toe, and then you roll back up. All of those 3 things are mandatory. So if you're thinking of doing a level 3 course, I would strongly recommend coming to the course with those skills already in your back pocket, because there really isn't a huge amount of time on the course itself to teach those skills, let alone learn them properly so that you're going to be consistent. So what I would do is, if you don't already have them and you're wanting to take your level 3, just grab one of the instructors over on the island, one of the providers over on the island, and see if they can do a clinic for you or for a group for those specific things, and have some fun doing it. I don't see any other questions in the chat box. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to ask just by themselves?
Mike, I think Jenny Sutton was asking earlier, do you do instructor certifying, recertifying?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm assuming that that question is coming out of Jenny already being an instructor and wanting to have that certification recertified, if that's the right phrase. Yes, I do. I recertify up to level 2 instructors. And that's just coming back on stream probably later on this year. Paddle Canada gave everyone a 2-year hiatus from that. And it still might be 1 more year, given the fact that we're still in the middle of COVID and people don't have the opportunity quite so much to get those certifications maintained the way Paddle Canada would like to see it. But keep your eye open, because I know the executive and the board of Paddle Canada, as well as the Sea Kayak committee, they're coming up with and finalizing what's going to be required for these maintenance clinics, or what we also call professional development days. And I think that's going to be good, a good thing, because it's not going to be quite as strict or quite as heavy on the requirements as what they once were. So great question. Thank you.
Mike, we don't seem to see you right now. I don't know if you turned your video off or the dog ate it or what, but
There
you go.
How's that? Sorry about that.
No problem. And Jenny was asking the question because she's coordinating all of our instructors here at Siska. So she was thinking about more than just herself, but a group.
So Mike, it's
Jenny. My guard dog.
yeah, it's Jenny Sutton here. Do you know, being on the board, will we be getting notification when what you just talked about is actually published on the website, or do we have to just keep going onto the website and checking every now and again?
No. I'm fully expecting, and if it doesn't happen, direction will be provided. That all of the instructors who are primarily our main members, all Paddle Canada instructors will be sent a memo explaining the entire process. That's my expectation. And I think that's the way it should be with any new thing that comes on board. So yeah, that's how I see it happening. And if it doesn't, we'll make sure it does, is what I'm saying. Getting back to Alan's and your question about the group, yeah, it's not a problem with doing something with groups of instructors that do want to get their certifications maintained. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I think it's a great idea.
Oh, we'll wait until Paddle Canada tells us we need to do it.
Yeah.
Joanne Nicholson's online too. She had a question. I'm not sure. Joe, do you want to unmute and just ask your question directly? I see it in the chat, but about using non-Paddle Canada instructors. Is that it? How does that work?
It's just when we have to recertify, right now they're saying it has to be done with Paddle Canada instructor trainers, but I fully believe that we can get that we can improve our instructing skills by taking from a variety of different instructors, even if they are not Paddle Canada instructors. For example, at PPS Coaches Day every year, we had a wealth of instructors, very few of whom were Paddle Canada. I learned every time.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you, Joe. I think it's more a matter of liability when it comes to Paddle Canada. And where I'm going with that is, if there's an instructor who has not been trained as an instructor trainer in the ways of Paddle Canada, we cannot be liable for any misinstruction that might take place. And I'm not saying that it would, Joe, but it's just a legal direction that has to be taken with regards to this. If it's a Paddle Canada certification that is going to be recertified or maintained, then I believe it has to be a Paddle Canada instructor trainer that must do the certification process.
Okay.
I'm sorry that doesn't answer the question the way you would have liked to it, but
No, but then I also worry about it becomes, you know, you end up taking from the same instructor all the time because that person is accessible.
Yeah.
Then I don't think you're really necessarily learning, you're not broadening your horizons.
no, I don't disagree with you. And one of the things that I'm a firm believer of is taking courses and clinics from different people, because you learn so much based on their differences in the way they teach and what they teach. So, because there's always more than one way to skin a cat, right? There's always more than one way to do a forward stroke. There's always more than one way to do a wet exit, all of these different things. So it's great to get the variety, and I don't disagree with you there at all. One of the things that as you get higher and higher in the skills level, sometimes you just have to do a little bit of travel to get to a new or a different instructor, if that's what you want, or you're coordinating with them and communicating with them so that if and when they come to something like PPS, maybe you can get them to set up a clinic to do stuff with a group of you. I would advocate that totally for some of the island clubs that are here, so that when instructors come together as a group, why not find out who the instructors are that are coming to the symposiums, get hold of them weeks in advance and say, hey, listen, would you mind coming up here a day or two early and doing this, this, and this with our club, or this, this, and this for our instructors? I think that would be a great thing. I know that there are a number of instructors from back east that when they come out to PPS, they are here for either a few days before or a few days afterwards. And I just don't think that there's enough advertising or marketing of their skills and their, what's the right word? Their ability to stay there and help out with coaching and instructing before or after. If that could be marketed a little bit more, I think that would be wonderful. Yeah, get a little bit more of the cross referencing of how people teach and how they teach skills and what kind of skills they do teach. Yeah.
Mike, the Siska has done that with the PPS instructors, but not specifically a Paddle Canada instructor coach recertifying, but that's something we could look at when that gets up and going.
Yeah, no, and over on the island, you've got a number of high instructor trainers over there, primarily skills and Blue Dog. I'm guessing those are the two main ones over there in terms of the higher certified instructor trainers. Out here on the Lower Mainland, there's myself. Who else would there be? Not too many others apparently.
The only one available that I've found on the island so far is skills. And now I've got you.
Yeah.
So when we can get things up and going, we'll
Yeah.
we'll hopefully do something as a group over here for the instructor research.
Yeah, and you know what? Skills is always there. So and they're a good group. They're wonderful instructors, and they've been doing it for a long time. And they love what they do, which is great. For me, there's always a cost to coming over to the island, but what I've done in the past is I've always, if people have asked me to put a clinic on, I'll just add a day onto the back or the front of coming over there to do a course, like the level 3 up in God's Pocket. I'll stop in at Campbell River and do a course up there for Campbell River or for Comox, something like that, or private lessons. Yeah, people get hold of me all the time for these different things. And if we can schedule them in, awesome. If not, as I say, you've got Skills, you've got Blue Dog, you've got Go Kayaking, you've got some of the other people further up the island as well. So yeah, we've got a great sea kayaking community out on the west coast of BC. And so it's just not the lower mainland, it's just not the island, but even in the interior. So there is limited choice at the top end. I agree with you. Something that we're always trying to figure out how to get more people up there. But there's also a whole bunch of really good instructors, right from basic right through to instructor levels.
Well, we've maybe run out of questions, Mike, but I think I just wanted to say, and thanking you very much for sharing your about your company and about your experience in New Zealand, that we have you coming over, as you pointed out, for a couple of different chunks of time there in April and May. And for those of you who haven't had a chance to learn with Mike, I think you'll enjoy it. Your chances are limited now because those courses have filled up quite well. So we'll just see how that goes. We might be able to do more, and but we'll wait and just see how that progresses. But thank you so much for coming online tonight and answering our questions. Really intrigued by New Zealand, and I saw somebody wondering about Yukon River. That sounded pretty interesting to one or two people too. So you might have stimulated some thinking.
No, I hope so. Not just for the courses, but just to get the passion and the juices flowing for the upcoming season. It's really not that far away. We're at the beginning of February. We start courses in March. So it's like a month and a half away that all of a sudden we start to swing back into full gear and get going. One of the things that I just want to leave everyone with tonight is one of my favorite words, and that is options. You've always got options, no matter who you have coming in to coach, who you have coming in to instruct, but also how you learn and what you learn. Because as I was saying to Joe, there's always more than one way to skin a cat. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can do a single skill. So try to get as much practice in and see what the different options are, because there's always going to be one or two that work better for you than the entire myriad of options that there are available. So Alan, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for the invitation to come over. I'm so looking forward to doing that and meeting everybody and renewing some old friendships and things that I haven't seen people in almost a year. It's been wild, this COVID thing, but certainly looking forward to it. And until then, have a really good time and get out on the water and get some paddling in.
I'm going out tomorrow.
That's good. Hey, Mike, can we see your dog?
I think she's guarding my wife on the couch.
Okay. All right. Yeah, we saw Tim's dog, so we just want to equal it out. Okay.
Yeah, she's a small, long-haired Belgian Shepherd.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I know.
You guys take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Take care.
Thank you, Mike. That was great.